The lights inside the Houston Civic Center buzzed with energy. It wasn't a rally, not exactly. This was billed as a bipartisan town hall, hosted live on national television, framed around bridging political divides. On paper, it sounded hopeful. In reality, people came ready for a fight. Denzel Washington walked in from stage left, dressed simply, dark jacket, no tie. He wasn't running for anything, and that's exactly why his presence rattled some. Jasmine Crockett had already been seated center stage, her red blazer sharp against the backdrop, eyes scanning the crowd like a prosecutor preparing closing arguments. She was the rising star of the left, bold, unapologetic, and unfiltered. Denzel? He was something else entirely. A man who carried weight without theatrics. The moderator barely had time to welcome the audience before the tension cut through. A question was thrown in from the crowd: what's more important, justice or applause? It wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but Jasmine smirked, leaned forward, and answered anyway. Applause only comes when justice is finally served, she said, voice smooth and rehearsed. Denzel didn't flinch. He shifted slightly in his chair, glanced toward the audience, and spoke in a tone so quiet it pulled everyone forward. Sometimes applause comes just because the room likes the way you shouted, he said. That doesn't mean you moved the needle. The air froze. Jasmine turned her full attention to him. Excuse me, she said, half laughing. Are you suggesting I'm here for claps? I'm suggesting, Denzel replied without blinking, that some people confuse volume with value. The audience murmured. The cameras zoomed. Now hold up, Jasmine said, her hand lifted like a yield sign. You don't know me like that, and you don't know what I've done in this fight. And yet here we are, Denzel replied. On stage. Lights up. Microphones hot. And no one's safer today than they were yesterday. The moderator tried to steer things back, but it was too late. The fuse had been lit. Crockett leaned in closer. I didn't come here to play soft so you'd feel comfortable, she said, her voice rising. I came to speak for the people still waiting for their justice. Denzel's gaze didn't move. Then speak for them. Don't perform for them. The room didn't erupt, it inhaled. This wasn't debate anymore. This was something raw. And the crowd could feel it. Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned forward, elbows on knees, her expression somewhere between a challenge and a warning. You've made a whole career out of speaking softly, Denzel, she said, her voice sharper now. And that's fine for movies. But real life? It doesn't get solved with calm stares and metaphors. A few people in the audience clapped, not many, but enough to break the tension. Denzel didn't acknowledge it. He tilted his head, studying her, like a man deciding whether to open the next door or wait. Calm isn't weakness, he said plainly. And shouting doesn't mean you're right. The people you say you speak for, they're tired. Tired of being inspired without being protected. Jasmine shook her head and laughed, but it wasn't friendly. You sit in rooms you were never elected to. Say things that sound deep. But when the votes are cast, when the streets are hurting, you vanish. We stay. A silence settled. Denzel didn't interrupt. He let the weight of her words land. Then, slowly, he replied. You're right. I'm not an elected official. But I'm also not chasing applause. That's the difference. I don't get paid in viral clips. I walk into these rooms because someone has to say what others won't. Crockett leaned back, smirking. Oh, please. This whole appearance of yours, it's as calculated as any press run. Denzel's eyes narrowed slightly. Then why does it bother you? Jasmine stiffened. The moderator jumped in. Let's bring this back to policy. No, Jasmine interrupted, waving him off. Let's talk about this. Since we're being real. She turned back to Denzel. You think I'm here for likes? That I show up on the floor of Congress with fire because I want a trend? I grew up in a zip code where power never showed up unless someone bled. And if I have to raise my voice to be heard in a building full of closed ears, I'll do it every day. Denzel nodded slowly. And when the cameras turn off? Who do you become then? That one hit. Even Jasmine hesitated. The room shifted again. Some leaned in. Others stayed frozen, unsure of whose side to take. This wasn't just a clash of politics, it was a clash of philosophy. Of what it meant to speak for the people, versus stand with them. And the divide had never been clearer. Jasmine's fingers curled slightly, the only sign that she was holding something in. She didn't raise her voice this time. Instead, she lowered it, and that somehow made it more dangerous. You talk like presence is enough, she said, steady. Like walking into the room and speaking slowly makes you righteous. Denzel kept his eyes on her, unmoved. It's not about righteousness. It's about effectiveness. She scoffed. Effectiveness? You think what we're doing in those chambers is about being effective? You ever tried getting a housing bill through a committee where half the people think poverty is a personality trait? That landed. A few nods in the crowd, a groan from the back row. I don't perform, Mr. Washington, Jasmine continued. I fight. And yeah, sometimes that means slamming a mic, sometimes it means walking out of a meeting, but it's because our people don't get nice conversations. They get ignored. And I won't be quiet just to make powerful people feel safe. The audience split again, a wave of applause, a few scattered murmurs. Denzel didn't react to any of it. He waited. And when the noise died down, he spoke gently. I'm not asking you to be quiet. I'm asking you to be heard. Jasmine flinched, almost imperceptibly. There's a difference, he said. Noise doesn't move hearts. Clarity does. And you have something powerful to say. But sometimes the volume drowns it. A hush fell over the studio. The camera zoomed in. Jasmine stared at him, the intensity in her eyes softening for a moment, not because she agreed, but because, for the first time, she wasn't sure how to answer. I'm tired, she said finally. Tired of explaining why we deserve what we already earned. Tired of being told to adjust tone when our lives are screaming. Denzel leaned in just a little. Then speak like it matters, not like it's war. The people you represent need a fighter, yes. But they also need a guide. Jasmine's jaw tensed. You don't get to tell me how to lead, she said, voice tight now. You're not in the trenches. I've lived in the silence after the shouting, Denzel replied. And it's always empty. Silence again, but this time, no tension. Just wait. The kind of silence where everyone is reevaluating what they believe, and why. Jasmine leaned forward now, both hands flat on the desk in front of her. The movement wasn't threatening, but it was unmistakably deliberate, a signal. She wasn't just answering, she was taking ground. You talk like wisdom lives in patience, she said. But we've been patient. Generations of us, waiting for systems to do what they promised. Denzel nodded once. And I respect that pain. But protest doesn't have to mean provocation. Sometimes it means showing up, and not letting the fire consume your words. You call this fire, she snapped. No. This is survival. You get to choose your tone because they already respect you. But the rest of us? We have to fight to be in the room. A ripple of agreement moved through part of the crowd. The moderator looked like she wanted to step in but wisely stayed back. The moment was electric, crackling with something too real to interrupt. Denzel didn't raise his voice. He never did. But there was a steel in his tone now. And when you're finally in the room, do you burn it down or change the furniture? He asked. Jasmine narrowed her eyes. Sometimes the furniture was built to keep us out. Sometimes burning it down is the only way to make room. That silenced even the whispering spectators. Then Denzel leaned back, folded his arms. You're not wrong. But what's left when the flames die down? Who rebuilds then? I will, Jasmine replied instantly. We will. Because no one's coming to save us. A beat passed. Not dramatic, just real. And then Denzel did something unexpected. He smiled. Not condescending, not mocking, a quiet, almost sad curve of the lips. Maybe that's where we agree, he said. That no one's coming. Which means we better not destroy each other while we wait. It hung in the air, not quite peace, not yet. But maybe something resembling mutual recognition. In the control room, a producer whispered, "This is gold." But inside the room, it felt like something far heavier than ratings. Because this wasn't just about a generational divide or tactics. It was about power, trauma, history, and the dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, words still mattered. The tension hadn't faded, but something shifted, not in volume, but in weight. Jasmine leaned back slightly, her chest rising as if she'd just come up for air after swimming too far out. She wasn't backing down, she was recalibrating. "You know what hurts most?" she said quietly. "That people only listen when I yell." Denzel's gaze didn't falter. "And when you speak low, they mistake it for weakness?" She nodded. "Or worse, for guilt." The moderator glanced between them, ready to intervene, but something about the calm now held her in place. The entire room had grown eerily still again, like waiting for a thunderclap that never came. "You think I had it easy?" Denzel asked, finally stepping forward. "You think I didn't bite my tongue through decades of boardrooms and sound stages just to be seen as human before being heard as black?" Jasmine tilted her head. "So why tell us to quiet down now? Why not pass the mic instead of policing the tone?" "I'm not here to police," he replied. "I'm here because I've seen what happens when we mistake the spotlight for the mission." That line hit deep. The moderator cleared her throat. "Mr. Washington, Congresswoman Crockett, are we saying the same thing, just in different keys?" Neither of them answered right away. It wasn't a yes or no moment. It was layered, messy, the kind of conversation political panels usually avoided because it couldn't be wrapped up in 10-second soundbites. "I don't want to be your enemy," Jasmine said softly, almost to herself. Denzel nodded, voice lower now. "I want to build with you. Not just go viral beside you." A few people in the audience whispered, some tapped on phones. The moment wasn't dramatic, but it was honest, rare. "Then say that louder," Jasmine said. "Because while you're trying to preserve the room, we're still trying to get in through the fire exits." That drew soft murmurs, painful truth wrapped in metaphor. "I hear you," Denzel replied. "But let's be clear, once we're in the room, we still have to learn how to speak to each other, not just to the crowd." Their eyes locked again. Not as opponents, not even as rivals. But as two voices molded by different battlegrounds, both trying not to lose the bigger war to applause lines. The panel break was announced, but no one in the audience moved. The air was too heavy, too thick with something unsaid. Backstage, producers scrambled, unsure whether to cut to commercial or ride the wave. The studio director whispered, "Keep rolling. Don't kill this moment." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett sat forward, elbows on her knees, hands clasped. She wasn't trying to fix her hair or reapply gloss. She was thinking. Hard. Denzel remained standing, eyes scanning the crowd, his breathing calm but focused. It wasn't pride in his stance, it was posture shaped by years of knowing when the room might turn on you just for breathing too loud. A crew member leaned to the moderator. "Cable just texted. They want the segment clipped for tonight's prime." Of course they did. Headlines were forming before the conversation had even ended. As the mic stayed hot, Jasmine looked up. "You know what bothers me," she said to Denzel. "When the media cherry-picks moments like this and sells it like we're on opposite sides of the same wound." Denzel gave the smallest nod. "Because pain makes good TV, but healing doesn't sell." The moderator, finally finding her footing again, turned to both. "Then why come here? Why do this on a platform built to simplify what can't be simplified?" Denzel's answer was instant. "Because silence gets edited worse than honesty." Jasmine added, "And because if we don't show up, they'll just invite someone else who'll dance around it. The crowd murmured in agreement. It wasn't often that two strong voices found common ground without losing their edge. And yet here, the room began to shift, not toward harmony, but toward mutual clarity. "Let me be blunt," Denzel said, stepping closer to the stage's edge. "This country's drowning in sound bites. We don't need more viral moments. We need strategies that outlive applause." Cameras caught the fire in his eyes. The quiet in Jasmine's response was equally powerful. "You still think I'm too loud?" she asked. "I think you're necessary," he said. A beat. "And sometimes," he added, "necessary still needs to learn how to land the punch without losing the message." Her lips curved, not a smile, but a concession. "Fair." A young producer watching the feed in the control room muttered, "Damn, this is actually substance." And that was the twist no one saw coming. The room hadn't quieted because the fire had gone out. It had quieted because they'd finally stopped yelling long enough to listen. The moment the feed hit the servers, the internet ignited. Twitter's trending tab shifted within minutes, hashtag Denzel vs Crockett, hashtag soundbite politics, and most notably, hashtag mic drop 1T save lives. Clips were cut and stitched before the show even wrapped. A slowed-down version of Denzel saying, "Silence gets edited worse than honesty," was set to piano music and shared by a page called Modern Truths. On Reddit, a thread titled "Did Denzel Just Change the Whole Game?" had climbed to the front page. But with all the noise, a new question floated in the current. Was anyone actually hearing what was said? Jasmine sat backstage, scrolling. Her team hovered, trying to show her the best comments. "This one's viral already, look, 100,000 likes in 20 minutes. She barely looked up. "They're sharing the words," she said. But are they thinking about them? In a studio across town, a conservative panel was already firing up their take. "Another liberal love fest," barked one host. "Let's not forget, Crockett's record isn't activism, it's clickbait." But Denzel wasn't watching any of it. He was still in the hallway, head against the cool plaster wall, breathing. He didn't crave applause. What rattled him now was the machine, the way sincerity was spun into spectacle. A young intern walked by, stopped, and said softly, "Sir, my dad never agrees with these shows. But he just texted me." That man spoke like a father, not a politician. Denzel blinked. "Then maybe we hit something real." Meanwhile, in downtown cafes, barbershops, churches, group chats, the moment became currency. An older black pastor in Atlanta quoted the segment in Sunday sermon, "Let us not aim to drop mics, but to lift voices." A Latina nurse in Chicago played it for her teenage son, asking, "You see what grown folks sound like when they disagree with dignity?" But not everyone was moved. A YouTuber mocked the exchange with a parody sketch. A headline on a fringe blog read, "Hollywood elite tries to hijack the struggle again." Still, the echo grew. Crockett finally tweeted, "Mic drops are loud. But change is quiet and steady. Thank you, at Denzel, for holding the line. Hashtag do the work." And Denzel? He didn't post a thing. He just watched. Observed. Waiting to see if the world would treat this as another fleeting moment, or if, just maybe, it could become a new baseline for how disagreements are held. Inside a mahogany-paneled D.C. office, Representative Caleb Moore slammed the door behind him and stared at his chief of staff. "You saw the clip?" he asked. "Which one?" she replied, arching a brow. "They're everywhere." The hallway moment? Or the mic drop quote? "Doesn't matter," Moore snapped. "The point is, Washington just got recentered around a damn studio argument." In the wake of the viral clash, phones in every strategist's pocket lit up. Not just Democrats. GOP donors, swing state mayors, media consultants, all began rewriting the week's talking points. And while networks scrambled for exclusive rights to post-show interviews, something subtler began to stir. Fundraising links were activated. Ads rewritten. Internal memos issued. On Crockett's end, some advised she lean into the moment. "You look fierce, boss," said a staffer. "Post a still shot. Caption it, 'I don't drop mics. I carry communities.'" But Jasmine just shook her head. "I'm not selling this. I'm surviving it." Across town, in a think tank meeting room, an advisor tossed a folder on the table. "Washington Post wants a follow-up op-ed. But here's the twist, they want it from both of them. Together." Silence. "Co-authored?" someone asked, incredulous. "They think it'll be historic. A black activist and a progressive firebrand showing unity in conflict." Nobody moved. Meanwhile, back in Denzel's neighborhood, reality hadn't shifted. Groceries still cost too much. Bus schedules still skipped weekends. But in barbershops and school lots, his name suddenly meant more than movie credits. A teacher at the local high school told her students, "Watch that clip. Not because he's famous, but because he proved you don't have to scream to be heard." Still, Denzel wasn't smiling. He sat on his front porch with an untouched coffee, watching two kids ride past on bikes. From inside, Ruben stepped out with a tablet. "Want the update?" he asked. Denzel didn't look over. "They're going to politicize it," he muttered. "Break it into tweets and blame it on each other." Ruben sat beside him. "And you didn't know that would happen?" "I knew," Denzel said quietly. "But I hoped this time, it'd hit different." Ruben glanced down at the screen. "Well, something's hitting. A councilwoman in Detroit just quoted you on live radio. Said she rewrote her speech after watching the exchange." Denzel finally cracked a slight grin. One down. From college dorms in Atlanta to diners in Iowa, the Denzel-Crockett clash wasn't just a clip anymore, it was a cultural spark. In a Baltimore podcast studio, a Gen Z host shouted into the mic, "This wasn't just politics, y'all. That was two realities colliding. That was truth versus tone policing, and nobody walked out clean." Comments exploded. Meanwhile, on a conservative AM radio show in Kentucky, a veteran caller growled. "Used to like Denzel as an actor. Now he's another Hollywood loudmouth thinking he can run this country. Jasmine put him in his place." The host chuckled but added. "Still, man had poise. Gotta give him that." And in a church basement in Milwaukee, a small group sat in silence watching the now famous 40-second stare-down between them. One woman whispered. They didn't yell because they didn't have to. That's what made it hit. In D.C., Crockett's office became a war room. Her team tried to get ahead of the sound bites. A young aide played a reel of Denzel quoting, "Mic drops don't save lives." "Sounds like he's mocking activism," she muttered. Another replied, "Or maybe he's saying activism needs substance, not theatrics." "Great," Jasmine snapped. "Now even my own team's confused." She stood by the window, watching the Capitol dome in the distance. "Why do I feel like the one time I didn't raise my voice is the one time they really heard me?" Elsewhere, Denzel sat in a recording booth for a scheduled interview with PBS. The host leaned forward. "Your words are being used in campaigns, Mr. Washington. Are you okay with that?" He paused. "They'll use whatever fits their story. That's politics. But what matters is the people who watched and said, maybe I should think before I clap." Across social media, a new trend began. People posting videos with the tag hashtag 60 seconds of stillness, short, calm reflections about America, hope, struggle, disagreement. And then came the unexpected. An invitation. The White House wanted both Crockett and Denzel for a closed-door policy roundtable on political discourse and public trust. Crockett scoffed when she saw the email. "Oh, now they want us calm?" Denzel just smiled faintly. "Now they're listening." But listening wasn't always understanding. At a campaign rally in Florida, a Senate hopeful played a distorted clip of Denzel's speech, cutting off the end to imply he had mocked working-class voters. Within hours, Denzel's full clip was trending again, this time accompanied by, "Watch the full truth." The country wasn't just watching anymore. It was choosing sides, quoting lines, redrawing boundaries. But Denzel never chased the noise. He returned home that night, stopped at the gas station near his block, and was greeted by the quiet nod of a janitor filling up an old truck. "Didn't agree with all of it," the man said. "But I ain't seen someone stand that still in years." Denzel nodded back. That was enough. 3 days later, the energy had changed, not just online, but in rooms that usually echoed with the same predictable arguments. Town halls were fuller. Call-in shows less angry, more curious. Something had shifted. In Houston, a classroom played the clip of Denzel and Crockett's standoff. A teacher paused the video. "What made this different?" she asked. A student in the back replied, "Because nobody won. They just spoke." Another added, "It didn't feel like TV. It felt like us." Back in Washington, Representative Jasmine Crockett stood before a joint committee, this time addressing police reform. Her voice was controlled, her tone clear, no theatrics, just resolve. "This isn't about looking good for a camera," she said. "It's about showing up when the cameras are off." Meanwhile, Denzel returned to his neighborhood rec center, the same place where he used to coach after school. No press, no staff, just a conversation with local teens. One boy asked, "Why'd you do it?" He smiled. "Because I was tired of being told we don't belong in the conversation unless we shout to be heard." A girl followed, "Did it work?" Denzel paused. "I don't know yet. But the fact you're asking me? That's a start." That night, news broke of a new bipartisan bill co-sponsored by representatives from both parties. The name? The 60-Second Accord. Symbolic, sure, but it pointed to something real, the idea that maybe, just maybe, a moment of clarity could be more powerful than hours of argument. Cable hosts debated the legacy of the encounter. Some said Denzel got lucky. Others claimed Crockett gave him the platform. But the deeper truth wasn't who dominated, it was how they showed up. Clips continued to circulate, not of shouting, but of restraint, of steel-eyed presence, of the tension that comes when two convictions meet without fireworks, yet still cause shockwaves. On a late-night podcast, a host summed it up best. Crockett came to represent fire. Denzel brought stone. And when fire meets stone, the mark it leaves ain't noise. It's permanent. In the final frame of a new viral TikTok, text rolled across Denzel's calm expression as he stood below the stage. "Real strength isn't loud. It's lasting."